Welcome to the City Show. Today we have a guest, Jean-Michel Lachance, a self-described jack of all trades, no pun intended, an entrepreneur, an athlete, and a cycling coach. Jean-Michel, welcome to our show. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Jack Alexander. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. So, how many countries have you cycled in?
So I don't have an exact number, but it's over 25 countries, mostly for getting to races, but also just as destination a few times for cycling training and discovering a country.
So, you cycle in every country that you visit.
Yes, if my memory is right, I think only a handful of times did I fly without bringing my bicycle with me.
That's impressive. And how many races have you participated in?
So again, I do not have an exact count, but I start fairly early, around 16 years old. And my most busy season, if I recall, had over 75 days of racing. So now I'm 37. So if you do a quick math, it's probably over 1,000 races.
So if you've been biking for 21 years from 16 to 37 and you race on average, let's say 80 days a year, that would amount to several hundred to thousands of races.
Yeah, so again, like I've not averaged 80 races a year, but yeah, it's probably over 1,000 races in total.
And which were your favorite races?
Uh, the top of my mind, I would say it's the Volta Costa Rica. It's a really nice event that I got to do fairly early in my cycling career, and I got some success, some pretty hard days over there, and I really enjoy the people from Costa Rica and the scenery of the country as well.
Well, Costa Rica is actually the country in the world with the most diverse ecosystem. Apparently, 95% of the world's ecosystem is in Costa Rica. So do you ever run into animals along the road as you're biking across the country?
Yes, so I've in Costa Rica, I've saw pretty much all the animals that there is to see there, from monkeys to what's the name of the I don't recall there's an animal who moves very slowly over there. I don't recall what's his name,
Oh
but
yeah, of course.
it's very diverse and beautiful.
You ever see any big cats? Tigers, lions?
In Costa Rica, no, but I've seen in other countries.
And which cities are best to race in?
As cyclist, I think I can say with confidence that we all like when there's a good crowd that show up. And for that, I would have to say the most memorable experience would be Charlotte, North Carolina. The race is not happening anymore, but there used to be a very popular criterium with a very impressive prize money. And each year there was a very nice tradition, and the cycling community really embraced that event, and the crowd turnover was very impressive.
So do they pop a champagne bottle like in the Formula One races for the win?
I would probably think it's more about beers over there, but yeah, there were the people on the streets were definitely partying.
That's pretty cool. So parties are part of the cycling race experience.
Yeah, mostly in American criteriums, which is very unique to the United States, I would say. But even in Europe and other countries, when there are good crowds, mostly people really go there and try to enjoy as much as possible, not only the cycling event, but getting social with other people that go to the event.
So that's interesting because in other sports, they might say that a crowd, think about, boxing or, maybe some team sports like basketball, that a crowd can actually make the player more nervous uh, rather than less nervous. And their performance can be impacted by big crowds. In your case, you're saying it's quite the opposite, that the bigger the crowd, the better the performance.
I don't know if it really affects the performance, but I know it affects my own motivation. So, for instance, I've raced in countries where the cycling culture is almost non-existent. Where, for example, when I race the World Cup in track cycling in Beijing, it was very disappointing to see there was only maybe 5 or 10 people going to see the qualification, and where in other places like Guatemala on the Queen stage, there were more people than some of the stage of the Tour de France.
Oh, wow. More people in Guatemala observing the cyclists than at the Tour de France in France.
Yeah, I'm probably not every single stage, but there's a Queen stage in Guatemala from Quetzaltenango to San Marcos, which is very with high tradition. And I recall for the last 20 kilometers, there were probably 5, 10 people deep for 10 kilometers. So hundreds of thousands of people showing up. So the atmosphere was very amazing.
Oh, that's quite a crowd. That must be amazing. And which cities have the nicest scenery for cycling?
Um, the nicest scenery, I would say Cusco, Peru, for its historical importance, but also when you go outside of Cusco, whether it be the Machu Picchu, the Vinicunca, it's really an amazing country to visit. And I was lucky to have my bicycle to make it easy and go to places.
Were you able to cycle around Machu Picchu?
No, so actually getting to Machu Picchu was a bit more complicated than I thought. So you can, I was with a friend and we initially wanted to go we wanted to go by bicycle over there, but it turned out to be a bit complicated. So we took the regular route with a train. But definitely, it's yeah. So to go back to Machu Picchu, it was a 2 day thing. So we just left the bike in the apartment and went. But other than that, I went to places with the bicycle most of the time.
So there are cyclists that do some extreme moves on the bike. Think, cyclists that, ride over big jumps or, ride down steep mountains. And what's the dichotomy and the split in the sport between cyclists that mostly do road biking and those that, may take a bit more of a risk in the cycling experience?
Uh, that's a good question. I don't know the split between the different cycling discipline. I would think the sport component, which is very intense and risky, is a minority of people versus so many people have a bicycle and do some rides every year. Um, so yeah, again, like it's when you do it in competition, it's an extreme sport, to my opinion. But many people simply enjoy cycling without the risk of competing.
Let's just give our audience some background. The most that you've cycled in a day was about 250 kilometers.
Yeah, so I'm definitely not as much ultra cyclist as others. I know I have friends who've rode for 24 hours straight. But yeah, for myself, I like more the intensity than the ultra endurance side of things. So the longest ride I've done was probably the race Montreal to Quebec, which we did in about 5 hours and a half.
So hold on a second. Montreal, Quebec City, which usually takes about 3 hours by car, you were able to do it in 5.5 hours,
Yeah,
less than
so
twice the length of time.
Montreal to Quebec is a very flat route, and most of the time in our side in our part of the province, the wind goes from west to east. So it has always been a very fast race with averages well over 40 kilometers per hour.
That's impressive. And which cities in South America would you add to your list of most beautiful scenery?
Uh, I would go with Galapagos Islands, which I got very lucky to visit in 2019. So I was in the country in Ecuador for the Volta Ecuador, which was canceled because of population protest. And since I had paid my flight, I said there's no way I will just sit in my hotel room and not enjoy what's available in Ecuador. But staying in the mainland was not really possible because of the protests and the security. So I took a one-way flight to Galapagos Island, and I ended up spending a week over there because the my return flight kept being canceled because of the protest. And at first, I didn't really know would I be able to cycling in Galapagos Island. I didn't know much about the area, but it turns out there are a lot to see. Uh, whether you have a road bike, a gravel bike, or mountain bike, it's simply an amazing experience with all the animals living in the city and the people.
Apparently, Galapagos has some of the oldest turtles in the world. I
Yeah,
guess
yeah,
they they
definitely.
they're they're no match for you on the bike, eh?
Yeah.
Which cities in Europe have you cycled
In Europe, uh, my first experience in Europe was in France when I was in my first years as a senior. I went to race for a cycling club in north of France where we I really did the the French experience, the French cycling team experience, which is staying with a local rider and getting to races in a van and all that. Um, but then in the years after, as I went through on the national team and other more important races, mostly we have race in Italy, England, Belgium, and yeah.
including in the big cities in London, Paris, Brussels?
Uh, so the biggest city I've raced in Manchester for the track, but I have not cycling in the road. But the other city where I was in, whether it be in Italy or France, were relatively small in comparison to the big cities.
Now, which countries are the most pro cyclist in your opinion? And you mentioned that, people in Colorado, for example, are some of the most respectful of cyclists in the United States. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I recently been in Colorado and I was yet again surprised because I've been there many years ago and now just recently, and I witness how they are putting a lot of efforts to make cycling safe. And you can also see that from the way the car drivers are behaving, because it's so well indicated. The pavement is extremely good, So yeah, Colorado is definitely high up in the list. But obviously, some cities in Europe are very advanced, and that come to mind like cities like Amsterdam or any cities in the Netherlands. And I would say also Spain. I was there this last winter. Is is pretty amazing from the quality of the roads that you find there, but mostly from the behaviors from the automobilists who are extremely respectful of cyclists.
So the behavior of the motorist plays a big role in the enjoyment of cycling in cities. On that
Yeah.
note, what are the worst cities to cycle?
Um, so I would have to go with Mexico City, and I would say that's mostly not because of the way people drive their cars, but maybe just the sheer amount of cars in circulation. So Mexico City, just to give an example, I'm not sure about the exact numbers, but it's millions and millions of people. So
I think Mexico City has about 38 million people.
yeah, so if that's the actual number, that's the population of Canada in just one city. So getting
Unbelievable.
around in that city, I find was a bit claustrophobic.
So Canadians are known for being polite. Maybe if they were all packed into a city the size of Mexico, they wouldn't be so polite.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
How about maybe you want to talk about your home province of Quebec and Montreal? What's your thoughts on the cycling culture in Montreal?
Yeah. So in Montreal, I would say it's in the categories of bigger cities. I think there are very good intentions from the municipality itself to make cycling as safe as possible. But just like the way the roads are designed and the bike paths and all that, it's really not so enjoyable. Um, Same with Quebec City. Um, the one positive thing is, if I recall, and if I go back 10, 15 years ago, there's a huge improvement in the way the car drivers are respecting the cyclists. But there are still a lot to do in terms of safe infrastructure and even more better behavior from the motorist.
So fun fact about Quebec. So fun fact about Quebec. Quebec is actually unique not only in that it speaks French, but out of all the US states and Canadian provinces and territories, Quebec is the only one that has the letter Q as the starting letter in its name. Is there anything you'd like to discuss about the cycling experience?
Yeah, so if there are people working as maybe urbanists or any person in power in cities where they can give advice about the way a city make a place for alternative way of transportation like cycling. I think they should maybe listen a little bit more about what's doing outside of their own city, but also listening to experienced cyclists who can maybe give advice, because a lot of the times there are really good intentions from cities to and they spend a lot of money, but in reality sometimes the investment is not really what's needed for the cyclists or for the alternate way of transportation.
So, city urbanists should keep an eye out and an ear out for what's going on in other cities and what people are doing in other cities
Yeah,
in order
yeah,
to
exactly.
maximize the cycling experience.
Yeah, and I think they are in some ways doing it. So, for example, in Quebec City, I know our mayor, Robert Marchand, has been in other cities, and I'm not sure which one in Europe, and he brought some of the ideas from there. So they are doing a little bit of that. Obviously, we cannot rebuild entire cities and put roundabouts everywhere, but yeah, as a general way, I think implementing the good innovation from other cities in North America would go a long way.
What do you think about bicycles that are publicly available in cities? You've said it's a great thing, but the bicycle programs, some of them end up in landfills where the cyclists aren't as active, as they might be in other cities. What are your thoughts on, you know, publicly available bicycles?
Yeah, I think it's great. Like as tourists or even like regular people, having the flexibility to grab a bicycle and go places is very good because not everybody travels with their bicycle and not everybody has their own bicycle. So I think it's great. But yeah, as I mentioned, some of those programs have been failure. Like when I visit China, it was a bit sad to see thousands of bicycles piled up in landfills. But other programs like New York, Montreal, and Quebec are very successful. So I think it's just about making it work and improving on the small details.
So, fun fact for people in the city of New York, the city bikes that you ride are actually manufactured in Quebec in a town called Chicoutimi. So the Montreal Bixie bikes are actually equivalent to the New York City bikes. And so you're just riding a slice of Quebec when you're riding in Manhattan or Brooklyn. What do you think about those that are too lazy to use a traditional bike? Obviously being an athlete yourself, people that use a motorized bike, do you think that they're missing out on the full cycling experience?
For sure, they are missing out. Like as for me, I really enjoy the physical component of getting around with a bicycle. However, not everybody has the same physical condition, so I'm all in about e-bikes. I think it's a great way for people from different physical ability to move around. So I don't think those people should see themselves as lazy, but just okay, maybe I can adjust my intensity. And for hills, like for example, where I live in Quebec City, there are a lot of steep hills. So people who have less of a good physical abilities, I think it's a great way to still be able to enjoy getting around with cycling.
And have you ever been on a hill that was too steep to bike up and you had to get off your bike in order to get up the hill?
Yes, yes, definitely. So mostly
That
that would
even
be
happens to you as an athlete that bikes 250 kilometers in a day.
yeah. So I mean, as too steep of an hill, which is when they are paved, it's okay. But some of the hills I've been on were dirt roads, and a very steep dirt road is very hard to go up. So some of the times I had to go off the bike to climb.
Well, if the road's not paved and it's too steep, you don't get enough traction to be able to, get up the steep hill.
Yeah,
So technically, that's not your fault. It's just a factor of the road you're on.
yeah.
Jean-Michel Lachance, thank you very much for participating as a guest on the City Show. We loved having you, and we really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.